You are listening to Dark Matter Radio with your host, Ronnie.
Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be in this most beautiful world. This is Ronnie McLean for Dark Matter Radio, and we are live here on this beautiful day in Arizona still. We're going to be leaving out of Arizona and be heading back up north for a few days, and then we're going to be on our way over to New Orleans for the 21st for one of the biggest conferences that the indigenous world is going to have in quite some time. It's going to be a very, very interesting time down there. So it's going to be, we're going to see whether or not if we can do what we're supposed to do, and if we're going to be able to get this great grand council together. Now, hopefully it will be a great grand council. It might just be kind of grand or great, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. I'm pretty excited about it. I'm going to be giving a whole lecture on and presentation on decolonization and why a certain type of reparations and what we have to do to understand about the economics and all that other stuff and why it's impossible. This leap of self-determination, independence, if we're going to be making this leap, what it really means and how it's really supposed to be done. So it's going to be a very interesting thing. There's going to be a big summit down there. A lot of chiefs supposed to be coming. Hopefully, and I'm saying this live on the radio right now, hopefully we'll have Chief Warhorse to come down there. It's going to be very important for all the chiefs to get down there. Hopefully Chief Strongbow or Skyhand will be able to get down there as well, along with the Memphis contingent. And all those people, and we're hoping that Chief Red down there in Tuskegee is able to get up there, Blue Feather and Reverend Chief Betty, a whole bunch of people. We're also hoping that the contingents up north are paying attention to this, and hopefully they might be able to send a representative down, as well as the people in the west. Very interesting time, the week of the 21st, down in New Orleans, where there's going to be a lot of interesting things that's going to be pointing out. We'll be talking punch bowls, the Black Panther Party. We'll be talking about the Muslims as well, and all these other black movements that's going on. But the main thing is whether or not this Grand Council is going to get together and then hopefully vote in some leadership, and then we'll be able to take it on from there. So then that way we'll be able to begin to start really organizing ourselves and bringing ourselves to a point as to where we'll be able to face the world as one indigenous culture. Although we know that we have many different types of cultures around as indigenous being stuff, but we have to be able to have many nations, many flags, one representative government for us all. That's exactly the way that it was done when they got here. This is the kind of representative government that we had. The Iroquois had got it down pretty bad from the civilizations that were here before the breakup and before the wars and all that other type stuff. So when the United States government, I'll have to get into that a little bit, when the United States government started to do their government and started to think about independence from England, it was the American Indians that were giving them some pointers on how to go about it, mainly the Iroquois and some of the Cherokee contingents who were the remnants, again, of the great empires, and had really fashioned their governments and confederations after pretty much the style of government that we have today. I mean, if you do really look at the Constitution of the United States, the original one, and the Iroquois Federation confederation, along with all its bands and tribes and all that other type stuff, you'll see that it's just about a mirror copy of the of their federation constitution with the American Constitution. Not only that, but on the day when they were, it was 1777, whatever it was, 1776, on the day when they were opening up their Congress, they had actually asked the leadership of the great grand councils of that very, very, very highly touted federation of indigenous people to come and speak to the first Congress. And my God, was that, I still am questioning why they did that. And that's what happened, because a lot of people were wiped out. A lot of people were killed and slaughtered. And I keep on telling people, we're going to get in today about how many people inhabited the New World when Columbus landed. And we know that there were others that came here before him. I mean, way before him. How can I say it? The Masonic people, the Knights Templars, 500 years before, quote unquote, the United States or the New World. This New World, that's how they dubbed it, was discovered. 500 years, they said that we're going to be making a new capital and a new world in a new place. I mean, how did they know that? Because they were over here doing all kinds of battling and all other kinds of stuff. And if you know anything about Oak Island, that's really coming out with a lot of interesting history. That history over there is starting to show that people were over here from the Middle East with war material back in the 1100s. So lots of stuff going on there. And it's very important to know that, there was a listener, she sent in an article to me which really sparked my interest. They said that the European colonizers killed so many indigenous Americans that the planet actually cooled down, a new study revealed. And that's from the Business Insider. And Alan Woodward is actually giving a report on that one. So, a lot of people say, how many people were really here, right? How many people were really here? When did they really come? Well, again, back in the 60s and the 70s, and the further back you go, the earlier they came. When I say the earlier, I mean like 6,000 years. Then it went to 8,000 years, and then 10,000 years. By the 70s and 80s, it was 12,000 years. And 12,000 years ago, they came across the straits and all that other type stuff and came over here and landed. So when they did come over here and land, what the archaeology record states is that there was a lot of wars, quite some time. A lot of wars. So they came over here trying to murder and kill people as well. These native, well, the Mongolian population, that is, the first wave of them that came over. But we actually lived in peace, from what we can see, for thousands and thousands of years. And when I say lived in peace, I mean lived in peace with the actual Aboriginal, indigenous, copper-colored beings that were here on this land. So the natives were over here, and there were some wars that started out. They were able to be amalgamated into the main system, which is a system kind of like we see today, a representative system. Every place has had at least two. Then there was a lot of other things that came in. Because they came over here shortly after, about 10,000 years ago, and mainly what they were doing was a lot of trade and stuff like that. And we also know that the Carthaginians and a lot of the people from the east was over here as well, about maybe what was it, 3,000 years ago, at least 3,000 years ago. At least 3,000 years ago, because 2,000 years was Christ, right? So we have to say at least 3,000 years ago. It was about maybe 60 AD or something like that, or maybe a little bit before then. But what the Carthaginians did, they had put a moratorium from anybody from the east to come over to the west by penalty of death. So there was nobody coming over here for quite some time. And remember, Carthage was a subsection of Memphis, or what we now call Egypt. So they were pretty powerful. This is one of the reasons why I think, honestly, that the European nations and the Arab nations actually went after a lot of places in Africa and Carthage, which was probably a very powerful place, North Africa, and found out that, and they went over there and attacked them, right, and just obliterated them off the face of the earth after a few times, trying to fight all those different wars. I think it took them about maybe 100 years or something like that to actually really get them. Hannibal stayed in Rome, I think about 20 years, right? So this is the reason why, a lot of people from Sicily and all that other type of stuff. But again, a lot of Europe was actually really carbon-based beings as well. But that's a story for another day. So when you get down to the population and what happened to all that stuff, right? What happened to the population over here? We have, that report that so many European colonizers killed so many indigenous Americans that the planet actually cooled down. Now, a lot of the presentations that I give, I tell people about the viciousness. I mean, the absolutely viciousness of these warring people that came over here, the warring factions. I don't call them explorers at all. These explorers were trained military personnel with one purpose and one purpose in mind, and that was to kill. They also came over here with the Catholic Church, and they were to help subdue the people, get them into a docile state, so then that way they can just be picked off one at a time. And that's exactly what they did. But they did them like, I mean, when you talk about the amount of people that were here and the amount of people that was actually left when they were done, it makes the Holocaust look like nothing, to be honest with you. I mean, they're talking about there, and I'm saying researchers like William H. Donovan. He writes that the discovery of America was followed by possibly the greatest demographic disaster in the history of the world. Research by some scholars provide population estimates of the pre-contact Americas to be as high as 112 million. I heard even upwards to 150 to 200 to 300 million people that were over here in 1492. While others estimate the population that has been as low as 8 million, which is just totally ridiculous. In any case, the Native American population declined 6 million people by 1650. Less than 6 million people by 1650. One of their low estimates of saying 112 million, 1492. And let's go with, you got to remember that, there were, the Cali was still here. You had all of the whole entire plains of the Dakotas and all that other type stuff, the Mississippians. You had all those tribes that were up north, right? A whole heaps of them, right? And when we talk about these tribes, we talk about who they are. You got to remember these pre-Columbian. And again, everything is relative to the names upon which these populations were given by the Europeans, right? So the indigenous populations and the indigenous peoples, their names aren't really exactly what their names are, because I believe that they did come over here, and then one of the things that they were trying to do was they were trying to kill off everybody, right? So they were estimating that there's 37 million people in Mexico. Central and Southern America in 1492, I believe there are more, including 6 million Aztec empires. Now, if you've seen any of my presentations, you'll see exactly what Aztecs look like. I mean, these people are quote-unquote black people through and through. You threw those people over there in one of these projects, you wouldn't even know who they were, right? They would just blend right in. Kind of like Jesus blending in with the Egyptians, right? And the Ethiopians. We had he was from Europe or something like that. But, again, that's a story of another day. So 5 to 10 million Mayans. And again, the Mayans, what the Mayans, they all look like where they are. 5 to 10 million. And I say that these estimates are really low because when I added them all up, these estimates only came up to about 54 million people. Nonetheless, there's 11 million in Brazil, which, again, I really hesitate to believe, right? Because some of the American history that I read, these places were populated through and through all over the place. 12 million in the Incan Empire alone. Right, that's all the way down the side of South America and Peru, down into Peru, right? Colombia today, what we know of all those people, right? But then the actual Colombians, you got to remember that. The lowest estimates give a death toll of about 80%, which is ridiculous because we'll get into that. But that's the lowest estimate, right? So when you get into and again, you notice what I'm quoting, or civilization people, right? Civilization people, not tribes and bands, because they weren't known as really tribes and bands when they first came here. They were known as the civilization people who were a part of these vast empires, these vast civilizations, from all the way down to Peru, through Brazil, all the way up through Central America, all the way through the Mexican area, spreading out over Florida, deep up into the north and the Great Plains, and all the way down to the California coast, and it goes all the way out into the Pacific Ocean, Hawaii, etc. Right? So it's vast, right? Vast, vast, vast. So, in any case, the native population, when it was all said and done, was less than 6 million people by 1650. In this collection of essays, historians and anthropologists and geographers discussed the discrepancies in the population estimated and the evidence of the post-European decline. Woodward Wood and Angela Roosevelt and others touch on this topic as the Indian slave trade. The Indian slave trade. Now you got to remember, the Indian slave trade started when Columbus came in 1492. Started when he came here because the beautiful Moors, the ones who were considered to be Hebrews, who spoke a Paleo-Hebrew, which was so far back the language goes to ancient Babylon, and that language had derived way back then. This is the reason why they call it Paleo, right? And this was one of the main languages that they were able to communicate with the people. It seemed to be almost like a standard type language, possibly, right? Possibly. Because I know they were speaking that on the islands because they were able to communicate with the people there. And they were able to communicate with some of the people on the mainland as well. Now, I'm not exactly sure if they were using Paleo-Hebrew, but they did know the languages because the languages were known to the Moors, who in turn were also called Hebrews or Jews. Right? So you got to remember, these Moors and Hebrews or Jews originated out of Africa, supposedly out of Africa, right? Because one of the things that we got during the slave trade, and I hate to deviate, but I have to get into this, is that the Africans themselves did not trade other Africans into the slave trade. Who they were trading were the Hebrews, who were not indigenous to the land to begin with. So they weren't trading their own people. They were also trading the retreads of American Indians, Aboriginals, that came from what we now know the Americas. Because Columbus brought a lot of slaves back, and a lot of people brought a lot of slaves back into the Americas. Now, I don't know the numbers for that, but as far as I know, it was pretty high. It was pretty high. So you got to remember that the slave trade actually started in 1492 when Columbus was coached by the Hebrews, Moors, who spoke Paleo-Hebrew, to take 500 prisoners back to England or back to Europe and submit them to the kings and queens over there. That's when slavery started. The first slaves that came to the Americas actually came in 1619, 1620. And 20 of them actually got off the boat at that particular time. 20 got off the boat. Right? And the majority of those were males. Now, I don't know what the shape of those guys were or anything else like that, but I know it was only like 20, right? Anywhere between a month to 2 month voyage. 30 to 60 days, depending upon what route they were taking. Right? So let me just go over this again. The pre-Columbus arrival in the Americas in 1492, in the area boasted thriving indigenous population totaling more than 100 million people. By the time it was all over and said and done, a little over a century later, 100 years, the number had dropped close to 6 million. That's a lot of killing. The European contact with it not only brought war and famine, but it also brought disease, smallpox, and decimated local populations. And I have to tell you a little bit about that, because what I do believe is that this diseases mainly affected the Mongolian population, the Native American population, the First Nation people. I think a lot of those people died off from disease. I don't think a lot of our people died off from disease. I believe the majority of our people died off from war and just plain out butchery. Plain out butchery. And if you want to know what kind of butchery I'm talking about, study what happened to the Pacific Islanders. See, they had pictures back then of what they were doing to those people. They had a few pictures on the internet about maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And unfortunately, I didn't take them off. But they had some pictures of back then too. And what you'll find is that the butchery that they use to kill these people, I mean, you have to be completely without a soul in order for that to happen. Completely without a soul. So now a new study published in the Journal of Quarterly Science Review shows that those deaths occurred in such a large scale that it led to a little ice age between the 16th and mid-19th century. Wow. That is crazy. They killed, brutally murdered so many people. So many people. Children, babies, pregnant mothers, grandmothers. They killed so many original indigenous beings that it actually cooled off the earth for an extremely long amount of time. The researchers from University College of London found that after the rapid population decline, large swaths of vegetation farmland were abandoned, the trees and fauna were repopulated, that unmanaged farmland started absorbing more carbon dioxide and keeping it locked in the soil, removing so much greenhouse gases from the atmosphere that the planet's average temperature dropped by 0.15 degrees Celsius. Typically, experts look at revolution as the genesis of human dream, but the study shows that the effects may have begun some 250 years earlier. Wow. Global climate change is a result of what the colonizers, all of the colonizers, did when they came over here and slaughtered more than 100 million people in less than 100 years. That's on an average of over 10 million people a year. And if you want to stretch it out, that's on an average of 5 million people a year in a 200-year period. Let that sink in for you. And they called me a racist. They said that I sound angry and upset when I see all these visions of what happened to all these people in my mind that constantly keep on coming to me. And I hear yelling and the screaming when they go into these to these neighborhoods. And they were neighborhoods. They were neighborhoods. They were cities. A description of one of the California cities when they came in said that the cities rivaled Venice 6 to 7 to 10 times over. Anything far greater than what they've ever seen in Rome. The streets were immaculate and they were clean. The people were beautiful and freshly kept. They were astonished by the choices of food, water, the clean rivers, and lakes. They boast about the farmland and how beautiful the terrain was and how great that they kept the forest. Animals were plenty. Fish were so plentiful that they jumped inside the boats when they came rolling down the rivers. They had magnificent, beautiful beasts that they were riding, although they said there were absolutely no horses over here, that the horses were brought by Europeans. They had something over here that they were riding. It's in the historical records. You were taught that they were nothing more than a bunch of savages running around naked with no riding technique. And then you find out that the Catholic Church and a lot of the other governments, they burned thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of documents and destroyed hundreds and thousands of artifacts, covering up the real history of the Americas, or what we now call the Americas. Humans altered climate already before the burning fossil fuels had started. The study-led author Alexander Koch told Business Insider, fossil fuel burning then turned up the dial. They had calculated more than 50 million indigenous people perished by 1600. I'm going to say the number was almost twice that. Because they always downplay the numbers. Always down. Had some guy saying that there was only 8 million people here. Yo, we're not so bad. We didn't kill that many people. Jews still had it harder than us. Experts have long struggled to quantify the extent of the slaughter of the indigenous American people of North America, Central America, and South America, which is actually all one landmass, the Americas. That's mostly because no census data or records of population size exists to help pinpoint how many people were living in these areas prior to 1492. They knew. They have a lot of information on what's going on here. Lots of information. To approximate the population numbers, researchers often rely on a combination of European eyewitnesses' accounts and records of in Canada tribune payments set up during the colonial rule. But neither metric is accurate. The former tends to overestimate population size since early colonizers wanted to advertise riches of newly discovered lands and European financial backers. The latter reflects a payment system that was put in place after many disease epidemics had already run their course. The authors of the new study noted. So what they're trying to say is that, you know, they boasted the size of the population. And in all reality, what happened is they probably were calculating it properly. They probably wasn't even getting half the population that they were running into. And the reason why they were talking about the population is because the reason why you got a birth certificate today is so that they can quantify and use that as collateral, use those people as collateral for them to be able to receive money from other governments. You're doing it way back then. Way back then they were doing it. The indigenous population is so jumbled up and messed up. You know, it gets on my nerves, really, when I hear somebody say, I'm more indigenous than you. I'm an Indian. I'm an Indian. I mean, just pause for a second when you hear that. I'm an Indian. Before 1492, that term Indian didn't exist for the people over here. But yet, they're more Indian than anybody else. They're still trying to be like the Native Americans. The Native Americans have their own history. Their own history. They have their own proud, glorious history from the time they did come over here to the Straits, when they came over here and populated the area, and how they actually lived here in the mainlands. Mainly in the plains. On the outskirts of all of the pyramid and mound structure cities. Reason for the easy mobilization of teepees, etc. Changing weather and climate and all that other type stuff. But when somebody says, I'm more Indian than you used to say, when did that term Indian come up? Because if they're using that, it just makes us all look like a bunch of fools. Makes us all look like a bunch of fools. Because they all know the truth. They all know the truth. I mean, when you kill so many people, 90% of the population that was over here was decimated. And it was more than that. Because let's say if you did have 112,000 people, 112 million people, 112 million people and 6 million are left, I believe it was a hell of a lot more people over here, a lot more people were left. Because they were still fighting the Cowleys, and they were still fighting a lot of wars up in the east, way up until like the 1920s. I was speaking to one historian down south, and he said one of the battles, one of the last battles that happened was actually like in 1925 or something like that. And I say probably, I said the war is still going on, first of all. And then don't forget what they did with Black Wall Street. Black Wall Street was the first time bombs were ever dropped on an American city. They dropped bombs on the American city. Military forces came in there. Militia forces came in there. They had police departments from other outside lying areas came in there. Don't talk about the Ku Klux Klan, because the Ku Klux Klan, that's governmental forces, because every single one of those guys that were in the Ku Klux Klan had something to do with the, well, most of them anyway, I'm going to say most of them, had something to do with either the court system, military system, police system, militia system. So when we look at this and all these studies that offer so many different methods and the research that divided up North America into 119 regions and combined through all the published estimates of pre-Columbian populations in each one. In doing so, the author calculated about 60.5 million people lived in the Americas prior to European contact, which is a lie. Right? They give you the math and we're supposed to just accept it. Because you got to remember, this barbarism was never seen like this anywhere on earth. It got really close to that in Africa when the Arabs and Europeans went in there, and they also killed like 100 million people. You don't remember that, right? Those people over there in Africa didn't start out Arab. They went up into southern Sudan, Egypt, all the way over to the other side of northern Africa, ravished everything, and that's one of the reasons why they got so weak in terms of being up there in Spain. Because they didn't start out as Arabs, knowing the Hebrew language and all that other type stuff. And when they tried to go down south to mess with some of them black folks down there, the Nubian empires kicked their asses and sent them back packing. That's what happened there, and they weren't able to get down there and try to do anything until World War I and World War II when they divided up all that stuff. I think it was World War I when he started dividing up everything. World War II, they finished the job. Vicious people. Vicious relationship we have with these people. And also a vicious relationship we have ourselves, because there was a lot of people in our own backyard that turned their backs against us. One of the major reasons, though, the reason why a lot of our wars didn't work out, because we were winning at one point when I was studying some of those Indian wars. We were winning at one point. We were winning, beating them back. It was the Native Americans from the Cherokee bands and a lot of those bands that were attached to the major nations broke away and began to start supporting the European fighters. They broke away and began to start supporting the European fighters, and they began to start showing them the back roads and all that other type stuff. You remember the 300? The 300, when they were able to hold off Xerxes and all those people, 250,000 men against maybe 1,300? And they were winning. The only reason why they lost was because they had one turncoat that turned Xerxes' men all the way around because he wanted to be in the rule. And that's exactly what happened over here. See, they don't teach this in history books. They don't teach this kind of stuff in history books. But we got to talk about it now because we got to know that a lot of our own people don't mean us any well. Especially a lot of our friends. Because when the Native Americans began to start turning their backs on us, what happened was that's when they began to start getting the upper hand, and the viciousness and the firepower and everything else that they were doing just overwhelmed a lot of the things, and they got through a lot of these defenses and just started brutally just killing people. Just brutally killing people. I mean, the killing gets so bad that they kill off about 10% of the entire Earth's population at the time. It's more people than the modern day populations of New York City, London, Paris, Tokyo, and Beijing combined. And you talk about, we're trying to stop nuclear war. We're trying to stop nuclear war. We're worried about them firing all these bombs. They came over here and killed off a civilization. They just didn't, take over a country. They killed off more than 90% of a whole entire civilization. Get that through. I mean, think about that. And I'm more Indian than you. A term that didn't even exist before they came in here. I keep on mentioning that because this is one of our problems. A nigga today is still a nigga tomorrow. You just can't get away from it. I hate using those terms. Apologize for that. Hate using those terms, but if you're still gonna act as though you're from nothing and black, and African American and all this other type of stuff, the way you were programmed to act, and then you get into this new shell of indigenous, and the inner shell is still the same being, still the same person that was colonized, and the mindset is still the same. Your dress is different. And don't let me get into the dress, because that's just ridiculous. Hawthorne Empire and the leadership showed you what we really dress like. There's a lot of pictures of the cowlies that show you what we really dress like. It wasn't like these Native Americans and how they're dressing today with all that bling. All that bling really didn't show up until the late 1700s, early 1800s. The time of the cowboys, basically. When they were able to start really rising. And we were steadily dying. The disappearance of so many people meant less farming. Using these population numbers and estimates about how much land people use per capita, the study authors calculated that the indigenous population is farming roughly 62 million hectares, 239,000 square miles of land prior to the European contact. I believe it was a heck of a lot more than that, because they took care of all of the lands. I haven't read that one report that there were major fires like we have today out there in California. Thank you very much, Forestry Control, EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. Thank you very much to all you people who love nature so much that they can't control anything. Back then, they had everything under control. I'm telling you, what they said, that this place was the Hesperides when they got here. Look up that word, Hesperides. Paradise, the Garden of Eden, the place of the gods. The total number dropped roughly 90% to 6 million hectares, 23,000 square miles by the 1600s. Over time, trees and vegetation overtook that previously farmed land and started absorbing more carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Yeah, but you want to know something? What they're not talking about here is how many trees they cut down in a 50-year period. When they got here in 1492, they said that what happened with a squirrel is that from Florida and the Everglades can go all the way up to the Northern Territories, into Alaska, without ever having to touch the ground. Without ever having to touch the ground. They chopped down so many trees that the trees were decimated from the shores of the Atlantic Ocean all the way into the Ohio Valley. And a little beyond. They decimated this place. Because remember, where they came from, they chopped down all their trees, ruined all their lakes, and soiled and polluted all of their rivers. So when you talk about more carbon dioxide in the air, it's really a shame that a lot of it has to do with the total entire type of climate disruption that happened when they killed these people. It created carbon dioxide traps, heats in the planet's atmosphere. It's what human activity now emits on an unprecedented scale. But the planets and trees absorb the gas and particles through photosynthesis. A lot of trees, they spew out a lot of carbon dioxide too. They just don't put out oxygen. They put out a lot of carbon dioxide too. Right? It's a whole ecosystem that's going on here. I mean, you're talking about the stuff that they're doing to the oceans, and you're talking about all the soil and all the glass and all the stuff that they're doing, right? When they did all these kinds of things. Equal to the area. So when the previous farmland of North and South America, equal to the area almost the size of France, was forested by trees and flora. The aeroatmosphere carbon dioxide levels dropped. Antarctic ice cores dating back to the late 15 and 1600s confirmed that decrease of carbon dioxide. The CO2 drop was enough to lower the global temperatures by 0.15 degrees Celsius and contribute to the economic global cooling trend called the Little Ice Age, during which glaciers expanded. And I'm telling you, understanding where we're coming from, what we're doing, what's happening, and what has happened is extremely important for us as beings, people. And I'm talking about white, black, Indian, Native Americans, whatever, right? This is for us all. See, because when they coast us out of the real history, what happens is that we all got cheated out of our real history. See, because the people of Europe don't know what happened to them, because 90 to 98% of all their history is burned. The Native Americans that are here don't know what their history is. From where they came from. Their history started, back over there in Asia Minor. They need to know exactly what their history was over there and how they migrated over here and all the difficulties that they had when they got over here. Wars and all that other type stuff. And then you have the original indigenous beings that are over here who lost all of their names, all the names pretty much to their lands. I think it's the Muskegee tribe, and they changed their names into Creek because they were near a creek. And then they put when they did the Doss Rolls and stuff like that, they changed all those people from Muskegee to Creek, and now they even lost their names. Right? The name of the Cherokee Indians, you don't even pronounce it the way the Cherokee really pronounces it. And that was a name that they said derived all the way from the Cali area. The Pacific over there. Hebrews have lost their whole entire heritage because their real name is not Hebrews. Something totally, completely different. Lost in the history, but I did read a book here lately that did say something who they were, where they came from, and how they ended up in Europe. When you talk about what was going on in Africa, over there in Memphis, and all that other type of stuff, it is put out there very plainly that if it wasn't for maize, the introduction of maize to the African and European continent, really the African continent, way back before any of them the population was the way that it is now. Way before the pyramids. Way before they were rising up buildings out of the dust. Maize and a lot of our North American, the Americas, vegetation and food was brought over there. They taught them how to farm and to cultivate maize, which over there today is called corn. And it's called corn over here too, GMO corn. But if it wasn't for maize, the whole entire African population wouldn't have gone the way that it was going, because it wasn't until then that they began to start actually having that kind of a culture. In Africa and around the world, out of 615 food products, mainly in Africa, I believe it is, 600 of those food products originated in the Americas. That's including tobacco that they didn't have over there in Europe. Cocaine came from the Americas, but it's found in the mummies of all those people over there in Asia Minor, and it's also found over there in Africa. So, I mean, we got to understand that when we begin to start naming ourselves and stuff like that, we can't do anything until we're actually in a position of where we have a historical society, that we all can come together and begin to start studying a lot of stuff of ourselves. I mean, there's a whole hidden history over there in the Grand Canyon. There's a whole history that is over there in all of the mounds all over the place. Wakanda is in North Dakota, I believe. Dammed up, half of it's underwater. That was full of mounds Whole entire history about that. So when we come down to the point as to say that they killed so many original indigenous beings, and we now know exactly who and what they are, that it actually changed the climate and brought on a mini ice age, I don't know how much more I can say about the devastation that was brought over here. It's disgusting. Disgusting. And what they want to do now is give us $100 million and have somebody, have some of their bouye people or whatever, create some sort of a government so they can dole out to us. A lot, you know, in Russia, during World War I and especially during World War II, they said over 50 to 60 million people died in there, and not one person in that country today does know somebody of their own family that was killed in both of those wars. It affected that population that much. It affected that population that much. But it didn't destroy their civilization. And we don't like to see anybody killed anywhere, period, right? Killing anybody for any reason, anywhere, is just unacceptable, period. That's just not who we are as people. So when they came over here, and they killed over 100 million of us, that's not chump change. That is not chump change. That's not little numbers. It's actually sickening when you can visualize how they were just going through towns and villages and just popping people off, stabbing them, killing them, just blowing their brains out, having fun. I mean, if it was any indication when they were running around doing barbecues with black people in their backyards, hanging them for fun, chasing them down, mutilating them. They're still doing that today. But you can imagine when it was being done. I mean, when you're talking about, 5 to 10 million people a year, you're talking about that's being done like almost every minute. It was a constant around the clock thing. And now you can imagine the terror that these people were in. The terror, the fear. Who is going to protect me? And that fear, that terror is still ingrained in us today. Anytime you walk out the door, you don't know if you're going to get shot. Anytime you go to your job, you don't know what somebody's going to say to you. What's going on? You try to live at a little bit of a peace, and there is no protection, no protected area for you whatsoever. They can come and just do whatever they want to do to you anytime that they want, like they did over there in Boston back there in the late 80s, early 90s, when they were chasing somebody down. They just shut the whole entire place down. Well, that's what I wanted to get off to be. I mean, I just wanted to let everybody know exactly what was going on with that, and what's happening with them killing so many people that it actually changed the climate of the world. They killed more than 90% of the people here, and they devastated them through war, not through disease. So, we have to be really easy with ourselves. We have to really be, everybody's talking about, I'm in this tribe, I'm in that tribe, I'm in this band, I'm in this nation. We all have to be really, 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 really careful, because when you have that much devastation on the land, nobody knows who the hell they are or where they come from. You can only trace yourself back for so long until the days where everybody was just getting slaughtered. They move populations around at will. All over the place. So when you get somebody that says, I don't know where I am, somebody, you don't know what their heritage really is, but you do know that they're part of this land. You do know that they're one of the fortunate ones or unfortunate ones for their parents to actually see and go through the devastation and watch all of their people die and get slaughtered and killed. And it's very unfair that we put stigmata on people, whether they're dark skin, light skin, carpet colors from burnt all the way up to the very glossy. Let us not practice degradation amongst ourselves. Let us not put ourselves through a situation where we're putting that hate that they taught you, that they taught us, they taught our parents, they taught us through all of this media. And they're still doing it today amongst each other. Let's allow ourselves to be able to do the right thing, help our people, train them to be able to love themselves, to be able to know that they are somebody, to know that they don't have to be underneath the tyranny of a system that has done this. It is impossible for anybody to even think having a relationship with somebody who has treated you that bad. And we have to let our children know that. That's where the pride comes in at. We have to let our children know that we cannot side with a world or government or anything that was involved in killing off more than 90% of our people. And some of those people were our Native American friends. Others were probably some real Africans that got caught up in the mess because they just kind of got blended in with everybody else. So let us be more tolerant of one another. Let us help each other heal and find our passion of love and caring and be more soulful and not so damning, because we have this little bit of power and this little tiny piece of the world where nobody has any power at all. Nobody's a leader. We're all in jail. We're all in the situation, and you can't complain about anybody, what they're trying to do to make themselves a little bit more comfortable. In this horrible situation that we find ourselves in as prisoners of war on occupied land in our own country. And I don't even like to say country, it's on our own land, right? Because a lot of us are so mixed up that all of these civilizations and empires, they got so jumbled up that it's just our land now. It's just land. Honestly, nobody really owns anything. And that's how it was before. We just lived on the land. We took care of what we had to take care of. People were taking care of this. People were taking care. They had a whole giant grand council to help keep everything on attack. I don't think there were any kind of real politicians or anything else like that. It was people that were representing themselves, governing themselves, and they all were part of the political leadership structure. So, just want to really just say that to make sure that we really give a heart to those who are lost and unfostered at this point in time in terms of their history. Most people still feel that they come from Africa. Most people still feel that they're, come from someplace else. Hebrews don't even realize that they probably originated in this land and they're trying to get back over there. They went over there to help build up the place and were chased out, caught, and thrown in jail. I followed the history. Several times I followed the history. It is a worldwide structural abuse system before racism came in. And before racism actually came in, became a white racist type society, or just a racist type society, before it became that, because I hate to say white racism, because when you get the Indians have a lot of racism towards us. You have a lot of Africans who got a lot of racism towards us. You got a lot of Chinese that got a lot of racism towards us. You have a lot of people all around the world that have a lot of racism towards us. So I can't just say it's white racism, because there's a lot of white people out there that are trying to do good, that are trying to make amends, but they're in the system. They're being directed also. Can't say that they're all a bunch of hateful mongering trying to kill us, but I can't say it's white racism, because there's a lot of populations that are brown skinned and yellow skinned people who don't like us. Just go ask your Korean friends. And on that note, Just remember, keep loving your heart. No matter what you're going through, no matter what you're happening to you today, whatever is going on, keep it with a smile. We love you. Take care. This is Ronnie McLean for Dark Matter Radio. We'll see you on another side. Peace.